Everyone around you is losing their mind over summer. Beach photos, countdown posts, best summer ever energy in every group chat. And you're sitting in a dim room with the blinds half closed, doing the math on how many more weeks of this you have to survive, if that's you. Stop scrolling for 1 second, because I'm about to explain the actual biology and psychology behind why summer feels less like a season and more like an ongoing test you never agreed to take. And by the end of this, you're going to understand something that took me years to figure out. Hating summer isn't a personality flaw. It's information. Your nervous system has been trying to tell you something for years, and nobody had translated it for you. I'm going to translate it right now. Section 1. The sun is not your boss. Here's something nobody says out loud. Summer is the only season that arrives with a mandatory personality attached. Nobody corners you in November, demanding you get into the spirit of scarves. Nobody raises an eyebrow in February because you're not thrilled about slush. But summer shows up, and suddenly there's an unspoken rule that your mood, your calendar, and your entire wardrobe are supposed to reorganize themselves around how much sun is in the sky. That's a strange amount of authority to hand over to a weather pattern. So let's actually ask the question nobody bothers to ask. What's really happening? Physiologically and psychologically, in the person who feels dread instead of delight when summer rolls in. Section 2. Your nervous system isn't broken. It's just louder. 30 to 5. Start here. A meaningful slice of the population processes sensory input more intensely than everyone else does. Psychologist Elaine Aron's research on sensory processing sensitivity puts this at roughly 1 in 5 people, nervous systems, that register more of everything. More light, more noise, more texture, more heat. Summer, for that nervous system, isn't a vibe. It's a sustained sensory event with no off switch. Heat that doesn't fade at night. Light that stretches until 9 p.m. Noise from every open window and backyard barbecue on the block. For a highly reactive nervous system, that's not mild discomfort. That's a slow-building alarm that never fully resets. You're not being dramatic. Your system is just refusing to whisper about something everyone else's system is content to ignore, then stack the social pressure on top of that. Summer collapses everyone's schedule into the same window at the same time, and suddenly there's this ambient expectation to fill it. The "we should all do something" energy that floods every group chat in June. If your nervous system reads that kind of open-ended availability as pressure instead of possibility, you already know how hard it is to explain that out loud without sounding like you're complaining about having friends, which might be the single most socially unacceptable complaint a person can make. And right behind that exhaustion comes the guilt, which is somehow worse than the tiredness itself. Because now you're not just tired, you're tired and required to feel bad about it. "I should be enjoying this" becomes a quiet, recurring accusation that follows you straight through August. Section 3. The sleep thing. Nobody connects the dots on. Here's the part that tends to genuinely surprise people. This isn't only psychological. Longer daylight hours directly suppress melatonin production. More light exposure in the evening means delayed melatonin release, later sleep onset, and, across multiple seasonal sleep studies, measurably shorter total sleep duration in summer months compared to winter, with some tracking showing roughly a quarter hour of lost sleep per night on average. That sounds small until you multiply it across 90 days. Weeks of slightly shortchanged sleep compound into a low-grade deficit that quietly reshapes your mood, your patience, and your emotional regulation, especially if you're someone who's already sensitive to sleep disruption. So, if you've spent every summer wondering why you feel subtly worse for 3 straight months and assumed it was just a bad mood, here's the reframe. You weren't just irritable. You were sleep deprived, and nobody ever told you the season itself was doing that to you. Section 4. When the culture doesn't match you. There's also an identity cost that rarely gets named. Summer has a dominant aesthetic. Tan skin, crowded patios, constant outdoor movement. And if that aesthetic isn't yours, if you're someone who thrives in low light in quiet rooms, in solitary focus, then summer keeps 3 straight months of feeling slightly out of step with the culture around you. Humans calibrate a huge amount of their self-image against their environment. Spending a whole season feeling like the only one who didn't get the memo is quietly corrosive. Which is exactly why so many people feel an almost embarrassing wave of relief the moment September arrives. That relief isn't random. It's data. It's your own nervous system finally telling you, in plain language, what it actually needs to function. Section 5. Sometimes it's a memory, not a season, and sometimes the dread isn't really about temperature at all. Seasons carry emotional residue. Maybe summer used to mean losing the structure that school gave your days. Maybe something ended in July once. Maybe you grew up in a house where summer heat meant everyone's temper ran short. The brain doesn't cleanly separate then from now when the sensory cues line up perfectly. The smell of sunscreen, the particular slant of 5 o'clock light, a lawnmower 2 streets over. Those details function like time machines, whether you buy a ticket or not. So if summer triggers a vague resistance before anything's even happened yet, it's worth asking whether you're actually reacting to this June or to one from a long time ago. Section 6, the reframe. This was never a flaw. None of this means something is wrong with you. In fact, the opposite tends to be true. Preferring quiet, cool, low stimulation environments correlates strongly with what researchers call thinking introversion, a trait defined by deep engagement with your own inner world. People who are genuinely comfortable sitting alone with their own thoughts have, whether deliberately or not, built a level of self-awareness that a lot of people spend years in therapy trying to reach. That's not a consolation prize. That's a real asset. One you built partly because pretending to love the heat simply never worked for you, so you stopped forcing it. What's strange is how rarely people who dislike summer are allowed to just dislike it without a correction attached. Without this, have you tried a better sunscreen, or you just haven't found the right hat yet? As if the problem was ever about hats. Summer carries enough cultural weight that disliking it gets read as a character flaw, so a lot of people quietly perform a tolerance they don't feel, which is its own exhausting, invisible labor stacked on top of everything else. Extended conclusion. What to actually do with this 12:15. So here's what I want you to sit with, because this is the part most people skip past. The way you move through summer. Retreating earlier than everyone else, rationing your social energy, feeling genuine relief the second a cloud rolls in. That's not a failure of character. That's self-knowledge in action. Knowing exactly what costs you energy and choosing to protect yourself from that cost before it wrecks you is something a huge number of people spend years in therapy actively trying to learn. You already have it. You just didn't have a name for it. So let's turn that into something practical, because awareness without action just becomes another thing to feel guilty about. First, stop treating your response to summer as a problem that needs fixing. It's a signals. Signals are meant to be read, not silenced. The goal was never to force yourself to love the heat. It was to understand what your nervous system needs and build your season around that, instead of around everyone else's. Second, protect your sleep specifically in these months. Since you now know daylight is actively working against your melatonin production, treat summer sleep hygiene as non-negotiable rather than optional. Blackout curtains. A consistent wind-down time, regardless of how bright it still is outside, and giving yourself permission to end your day before the sky does. Third, budget your social energy the way you'd budget money. You don't have to accept every invitation the "we should all do something" energy generates. You're allowed to choose 2 gatherings a month instead of 8. And you're allowed to leave early. Rationed energy, spent deliberately beats scattered energy, spent out of guilt. Fourth, separate the memory from the moment. If a wave of dread hits before anything's actually happened, pause and ask whether you're reacting to this summer or an old one. Sometimes just naming that gap, "This is a memory, not a prediction," is enough to loosen its grip. And fifth, stop apologizing for it. You don't owe anyone a performance of summer enthusiasm you don't feel. You're allowed to say, "I'm just not a summer person," the same way someone says, "I'm not a morning person," as a fact about yourself, not a confession. Because here's the truth underneath all of it. The version of you that retreats indoors, that guards its sleep, that says no to the 4th invitation of the week, that version isn't the version failing at summer. That's the version that's been paying attention to itself the whole time, while everyone else was just following the season's script without ever asking whether it fit them. You didn't miss the memo. You read a different one. And it happened to be about yourself. If any part of this described exactly how your summers feel, I'd genuinely like to know in the comments what this season actually feels like for you. Because for every sunset photo and beach caption out there, there's a quiet room somewhere with someone in it who's just been waiting for someone to say this part out loud.